Thank you very much. Before we start, I just want to take the opportunity to thank Alan Dunlop, who's in the room this evening. Alan very kindly sponsored a Together UK Foundation Women's Conference in January. I've not had an opportunity to thank him, so Alan, wherever you are, sat in this room, thank you very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. My lords, baronesses, consular generals, MBEs, OBEs, CBEs, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and Jim Dillon, who's here. Thank you for joining us this evening at Queen's University Belfast for the Together UK Foundation's inaugural lecture in our series of lectures entitled The United Kingdom, Best for All. I think it's quite fitting we're here at Queen's, one of the great institutional pillars of the United Kingdom, and the lecture tonight is going to be given by a man born and bred in this wonderful country. A barrister with a stellar career as a professor of law and practicing lawyer, an international academic entrepreneur running his very own successful consultancy business across Europe, Africa, Asia and North America, and president of the Accra Business School in Ghana. But wherever he is in the world, he keeps a close eye on his beloved Northern Ireland, and as painful as it can be, follows the Northern Irish football team, as he did last night, sat in a cold, windswept Windsor Park watching another unlucky result. I was with him. Ladies and gentlemen, here to give his lecture on a united Ireland, why it is neither desirable or inevitable, would you please give a warm welcome to Together UK Foundation Advisory Board member, Professor Cedric Bell. Thank you.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So, first of all, I want to welcome you all to tonight's function. Without you, there wouldn't be any need for me to be here, so I'm delighted you came. And I trust you'll find what I have to say helpful in terms of energising UK together. I've got a set of PowerPoints, and the starting point is to try and chart out what we want to achieve this evening. I've identified on the first PowerPoint 6 aims. I won't repeat them verbatim. I don't think it's necessary given the excellent diction and IT arrangements. But there are, I think, of the 6, 3 that I want to emphasise in particular. I want to pose some very pertinent questions about the progress and commitment towards a united Ireland, which has attracted a lot of attention. Secondly, and I think this is very important in the light of what we're trying to achieve in UK Together, to articulate a more universal case for the Union. And also lastly, to imbue within pro-Union opinion and constituency a confidence and a belief in our cause. Because I think the pro-Union case has gone somewhat by default, and we need to kickstart. We need to be able to articulate a case for the Union, because our opponents certainly are very agile in articulating a case for United Ireland. So those are the aims of the session, and obviously in terms of the synopsis slide, they're consistent with the 6 aims, with of course hopefully articulating the 6 aims that I've identified. In terms of key dynamics in politics, I strongly believe that aspiration for the future is very important. In fact, it's probably more important than holding on to the past. Why? Because aspiration inspires hope, while clinging to the past, which could be disputed, is clearly unattractive. And one of the themes I'd like to leave with you all this evening is the question, will identity politics deliver a better and assured future for Northern Ireland, and in particular for the retention of the Union as we know it and love it? I leave that for you to decide in the light of the deliberations we're going to look at. Clearly, the criteria for a border poll, as you know, the Belfast Agreement includes a provision for a border poll should the majority be in favour of Irish unity. It's my perception that that requirement is not at present satisfied. If you look at the May 20 2022 Northern Ireland Life and Times survey, which is the one I was able to identify recently, about 48% of the people questioned, nearly half said they wanted to remain with the UK. A third indicated they would vote for United Ireland. But crucially, and this is why I think it's important that we've launched UK Together, 63% of the people questioned believe it is more likely following Brexit. We want to reassess the arguments for a border pool, and I think we could identify 4 key dynamics, none of which I believe are compelling, which have generated this engine of enthusiasm to bring a United Ireland back onto the political agenda. Sinn Féin becoming the largest single party in the recent May 2022 Assembly elections, demographic changes, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the removal of what is perceived to be the historic Protestant Unionist majority, and lastly, increase in the number of people in Northern Ireland holding Irish passports. Before we look at each of these projected arguments in favour of United Ireland in turn, I think it's important to emphasise a point that I believe is very pertinent, and that is we live in an era where perception frequently trumps substance, and where sound bites are much preferred to inconvenient facts. If you look at the Assembly elections, I don't need to articulate and emphasise all the points on the slide. Clearly, the fact that Sinn Féin became the largest party was clearly a symbolic achievement by them. But in reality, what doesn't come across is they didn't gain any more seats. They remained constant. The reason they became the largest single party was because of the loss of 3 DUP seats. And there's still technically more designated unionist MLAs in Stormont than nationalists. That being said, I think the key point is that my perception is that Northern Ireland is much less in the grip of unionism than it used to be. And that's something we need to respond to. The very first elections in Northern Ireland, and I can truthfully say to you, I wasn't around at the time, there were 52 seats. There were 40 unionists elected and 12 nationalists. And for the first 50 years in the history of Northern Ireland, I think it's true to say that 60% of all the seats were held by a unionist member of Parliament. That's no longer the position. Some would say Northern Ireland is becoming more Irish. I would like to say it's becoming more Northern Irish. And I think this is a dynamic we need to embrace and build upon. So that's the first of the 4 arguments that are frequently articulated in favour of a United Ireland. The second is the consensus, the Northern Ireland census, and of course the fact that seemingly there are more people identifying as Catholics than Protestants. The results were not unexpected, in my opinion, but they were clearly symbolic. And we now have a suggestion that there are really 3 communities within Northern Ireland, none of which constitutes a majority, I should say, Protestant, Catholic, and unaligned. I don't necessarily subscribe to that view for reasons I'll articulate later. Also, I think that the results of the Northern Ireland census show that although the majority do not designate themselves as Protestant, that has been seized upon by pro-United Ireland colleagues as indicative that United Ireland is in prospect. But there is no evidence to show that non-Protestants would vote for unity, just as some who would designate themselves as Protestant could well vote for United Ireland. So there are 2 arguments tied up in the recent Northern Ireland census. And the last argument that's frequently trotted out, the increase in people in Northern Ireland holding Irish passports. Again, in this first slide, I give you some statistics, which I think, are accurate based on sources that I've identified. But I think the critical point is the commentary. Just because an increasing number of Northern Ireland people apply for an Irish passport is not, in my opinion, conclusive of a shift in personal identity allegiance. Rather, it's like what I've described in the merchant shipping arena, a flag of convenience. There are lots of people have got an Irish passport because they don't want to have to get their passport stamped every time they go into the EU, or they also want to take the advantage of the EU health insurance card. So it's not a signifier of constitutional convenience. And I think that's an important point to emphasise. And possibly a fifth argument that is frequently articulated in favour of United Ireland is the suggestion that Unionists who voted Remain may be happy to vote for United Ireland to gain an ongoing connection with the EU. I'm not persuaded of that argument either. So my contention, ladies and gentlemen, is that the contemporary arguments that are frequently used in the media by the United Ireland lobby to bolster the case for a border poll are far from compelling. Personal identity and a sense of belonging. The well-known mathematician Blaise Pascal, nearly 400 years ago, concluded, people almost universally arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. Blaise Pascal, the famous mathematician, said people almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. And I believe this is the pivotal consideration which transcends transient prime ministers and government decisions. Which country and its value system do you identify with and why? And I believe this trumps economic arguments and statistics. You can get statistics to prove anything. Also, if you were looking at the last period in the history of the United Kingdom, it wasn't the most sensationally attractive in terms of performance. But you know, it's transient. Prime ministers come and go, governments come and go. But at the end of the day, who do we want to identify with? Which country do we feel at home with? And a key dynamic over the last 10 years has been the growth in the Northern Irish identity. When I was much younger, if I was asked to fill in a form of nationality or fill in these diversity questionnaires, invariably I put down British, and I'm sure people of my age group did the same. Now I put always Northern Irish, even though I've lived in England and abroad for many, many years. And I think this is a key dynamic, that people in this province see themselves more and more as Northern Irish people. And that's not surprising, given that for 100 years, still all right, for 100 years we have been, I was going to use the word semi-detached from the United Kingdom, but it's part of the United Kingdom and certainly detached from our friends in the Republic. So I think the emergence of a pronounced Northern Irish identity is a very significant new dynamic, building upon the fact that the arguments that are traditionally and currently being used to favour the case for United Ireland, as I've indicated, I don't find are particularly compelling. I think there's a pride in the province and its achievers across myriad disciplines, and I genuinely believe that that identity is going to be better retained in the United Kingdom with the Welsh, the Scots and the English, because if we are subsumed within a United Ireland, I don't think the Northern Irish identity will survive. But I think there's also another pertinent point here. Northern Irish identity has to have a constitutional identity as well. Both go together, in my opinion. In addition to the matter of personal identity, a lot of emphasis is put on safeguarding the pro-union identity in a United Ireland. What sort of United Ireland is on offer? Well, in my opinion, it will bring to an end our connection with Britain. We will be absorbed within a 32-county republic. And I don't believe there'll ever be another opportunity to come back out once we're in United Ireland. And this is one of the very important points that I feel needs to be emphasised. We talk about referendum, and I believe that those who favour United Ireland will keep on until, hopefully, they get the right result. It reminds me of what the Earl of Manchester said during the English Civil War. He said, if we fight 100 times and beat him 99, he will still be king. And if he beats us but once, or the last time, we shall all be hanged and shall lose our estates. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that if there is a positive referendum of United Ireland, we'd all be hanged and lose our homes. But the point is this. If we have to win every referendum that's coming, we cannot afford to lose one of them. Why? Because there'll be no return to Northern Ireland as we know it. And that's why we need to energise organisations like UK Together. We have to articulate a contemporary case for the Union. As W.B. Yeats put it rather starkly, he said away back in the Irish Senate in 1925 that ultimately, in those days, may not be the same today, that getting the North was a top priority to complete the project of 1916. But what sort of United Ireland is on offer? You may be better equipped and more insight than I have as to what is being put forward. I'm not entirely sure what a shared Ireland will look like. The research I have done suggests that the only person who immediately comes to mind who has tried to articulate what it might look like is the Dublin judge Richard Humphreys, who's published 2 books. The first, Scenarios for United Ireland, Countdown to Unity in 2008, and more recently, Beyond the Border in 2018. What he suggests in these books is that he feels that unionists can be accommodated in a United Ireland to their satisfaction. And that's basically what we need to try to understand when people argue for United Ireland. What actually will a shared Ireland look like? What exactly will there be in it for the unionist or the pro-union community? Will there be parity of esteem between unionist and national identities? Because I feel it'll be a very major challenge to try and achieve even a semblance of parity of esteem as between 2 very distinctive and divergent traditions. Will the United Ireland on offer be a federal one with a devolved administration in Belfast, or a unitary one? These are the questions I think we need to energise ourselves to address to our opponents. A lovely phrase, shared Ireland, shared island, but what does it mean? How will we accommodate the unionist tradition, if at all? Because I believe it's naive to assume that we'll be attracted to the Republic as it is currently constituted. Having said that, I personally am very much in favour of a positive relationship with the Republic. I've got business interests there. I love the Irish rugby team, did very well recently. And I want them to succeed, just as I want Northern Ireland to succeed. And I think we have to come across as being positive in our reaction and interaction with our friends and colleagues in the Republic. I don't think we will be attracted to the Republic as it currently stands. I also am very clear, I don't think people in the Republic necessarily have a close affinity to people in Northern Ireland. How could they? They have developed in their own way for 100 years, as we have developed in our way for 100 years. And of course, will they be willing to reconfigure itself and alter 100 years of their independent nationhood and national story? The 100 years factor, I believe, is quite a relevant one. They have developed successfully in their way for 100 years. We have developed in our way, I think, reasonably successfully for 100 years. But what gestures or accommodations might be offered in the shared Ireland that is frequently referred to? Would there be a new national flag, a new national anthem? I'm not convinced that anything tangible will be forthcoming, not least because of the rather unsuccessful efforts that were made a couple of times to join the rather innocuous Commonwealth. The Republic chose not to. I'm not saying that in any critical way, but nevertheless they chose not to. So these are the questions that I think we need to direct to colleagues who feel that a united Ireland is a panacea for all ills. But there's another point that I do feel is important, and that is the practical challenges for the Republic in respect of unity. What would be the consequences for people in the Republic? Because I think that many people are being rushed or led into a united Ireland with the concept that it's over the horizon, so to speak, by a small number of activists and propagandists without really serious consideration of potential impact and what might be involved. And my feeling is that lots of people in the Republic are not overly enthusiastic for united Ireland. But of course, we have to work on the basis that no senior political figure in the Republic is going to come out and say, let's be cautious. Why? Because that is part of the desire of all the major political parties ultimately to have union between the 26 and the 6 counties. But there are two, in my opinion, key points that need to be addressed to people in the Republic. The first is, do they fully understand what is going to be the potential outcome of a united Ireland? Because, as you know, in the Belfast Agreement, a majority vote has to be passed in both jurisdictions. It's not just in Northern Ireland, it's also the vote in the Republic. They have recovered very well from the banking crisis in 2008. They're prosperous, stable, and I'm delighted about that. But will the people in the Republic want to jeopardise that? There are two main arguments that we can at least bring to the attention of the electorate in the Republic. Obviously, in the winter of this year, the economic forecast from the EU Commission predicted in February that the Republic's economy would grow in GDP terms by 4.9%, very positive. But nevertheless, despite their prosperity and stability and prosperity, they have economic challenges in housing and healthcare, just as we have in the United Kingdom. There are long waiting lists for social housing, and homelessness in the Republic is at a record high. The healthcare system in Ireland is probably no better off than it is here in the United Kingdom. And like most of the world, it's been buffeted by the fallout from the Ukraine-Russian war, pandemic, and the cost of living. There are two key threats to the Republic, and the electorate in the Republic need to be reminded of these threats, in my opinion. There's the financial and the economic one. Let's not lose sight of the fact that Northern Ireland receives a very substantial subvention from the United Kingdom. The cost of reunification varyingly has been put somewhere between 4 billion and 30 billion euro. Who's going to pay for that? And that will trigger a financial shock to the Republic's economy and necessitate either a hike in taxes or a significant cuts in public expenditure. And that poses the question, does the electorate in the South appreciate that, or do they want to bear the cost? But we need to get that argument into the public domain. It's not that we want to deter people voting the way they feel is appropriate, but it's a very serious argument. And my understanding of people I've met in business in the Republic is that there's no great enthusiasm for a united Ireland at present. Yes, ultimately, that's the dream. But sometimes dreams take a little bit longer to be achieved. And I think a lot of people in the Republic, yes, great to have a united Ireland, but not just today, maybe not just tomorrow either. And that's something we need to get across. The second one is the risk of political instability and violence. I don't want to overemphasize this because we do not want to go back to where we were in Northern Ireland in the 70s and 80s. But let's be quite practical and realistic. If there was a united Ireland, especially if the vote was very narrow, there's going to be the real potential of a large section of the community not enamoured, let's be as neutral as possible with the new political arrangements. How might that pan out? Well, a lot will depend if there's any accommodation for the unionist tradition that we talked about earlier. But the reality is that there must be a risk that the new country would not be stable. There might be instances of disorder. And one only has to look at what's happening in France and Israel at present to realise how public perception of a country can radically change. So to try to bring together where we've got to already, I'm suggesting to you that the arguments that are frequently relied upon by the media to bring forward the idea of a united Ireland are not as compelling when you look at them in some detail. Also, what do we mean by a shared Ireland? What are the offer of accommodation for a pro-union tradition, if any? And also to thirdly, make the point that the electorate in the Republic have to accept and vote for United Ireland. And while no senior politician in the Republic is going to argue the case for us, I believe that we have got to grasp the nettle, so to speak, and start engaging with people in the Republic and say, look, do you realise what might be in store if there is a united Ireland? But at the same time, I go back to a point I made earlier. We need to have hope for the future. We need to have an aspirational agenda. And that brings me to what I call the 21st century case for the union with Britain. It's not the case for union that existed in 1921, because things have moved on quite dramatically. I go back to some of the points I've made earlier. Northern Ireland has a distinctive identity based on the 100 years in which we have been separate from the 26 counties and have had some degree of control over our own affairs. I believe that identity, which is stronger than ever, is better served and be sustained in the United Kingdom with the Scots, the Welsh and the English. What valued alliances are best for Northern Ireland? Well, I think the key point is that the United Kingdom as it stands, is a mature political entity and marketplace. The UK is a permanent member of the Security Council, and these are matters that transcend and endure beyond the vicissitudes and short-sightedness of transient politicians. At a time when it is suggested that the threats to European security are greater than ever since the Second World War, do we really want to leave the comparative security of the United Kingdom and its membership of NATO for the neutrality of Southern Ireland? Defence of the realm is an issue of importance, pensions and welfare. And last week in Parliament, one of our MPs highlighted, not that I think that individual statistics are altogether compelling, I think some of these broader points are more important, but just for an example, one of our MPs highlighted that we have in Northern Ireland world-class broadband access. Northern Ireland has the highest percentage accessibility for gigabit-capable broadband in the UK, twice that of the Republic. Yes, you can get statistics to support any argument, but it's these bigger pictures about Northern Irish identity. Where do we feel we belong? What are the arguments we need to put? What is on offer about a shared Ireland? And what would a new modern pro-union constituency look like? And I think this is something that's attracted me in particular to UK Together. If you look at how the demographics have changed, how the fact that in 1921, 40 Unionists to 12 Nationalist MPs, and now virtually 50-50, a slight preponderance in favour of Unionist MLAs. Could it be built? Could we build a new pro-union constituency? And I use this expression pro-union quite a lot. Why? Because for some people that we want to reach out to, the term unionist may not be as appealing as it might be to some of us. And to me, as a reasonably successful business person, to me the ultimate is keeping Northern Ireland in the Union, not winning every little battle here and there. The main thing we need to energise ourselves about is keeping Northern Ireland in the Union. Can we build a new constituency, a pro-union constituency? I believe yes, but we've got to focus on young people. Why? Because young people inherit the future. In 10 or 20 years' time, some of our older people, possibly including myself, we will have to hand the baton on. It's energising young people. Young people in today's world don't remember the Troubles. Anybody under the age of 30, I don't think will remember the Troubles. So that is the reality. Young people throughout the Western world have substantially a more liberal value system than older generations. I think we've got to embrace modernity, whether we like it or not, embrace a spread of values, religions, and international relationships. The new pro-union constituency has to be united, inclusive, articulate, and persuasive. And the fact that the prime political force for another border poll and United Ireland still unashamedly reveres IRA violence must be a sobering reality for those of us who disavow violence to secure political goals. My own personal view, and it's a personal view, is that I don't think we can afford any longer the luxury of a cacophony of three unionist parties. What we need is a new pro-union constituency that will be a broad church which will appeal to a wider cross-section of the population than was the case with traditional unionism. And I believe by focusing on that and young people and developing the arguments for the union, that is the way forward. Going back to a united Ireland and how it might look like and what is the concept of a shared Ireland, another thought that we would want to get some clarity on, how will in a united Ireland the narrative of the IRA campaign 1970 to 1994 fit into the history books? How will that be projected in a united Ireland to the schools? It'd be interesting. I think that's a very interesting and indeed quite divisive challenge. So we move rapidly to what we're trying to do at Together UK Foundation. We want to try and start changing the dynamic. To me, we want to build a broad-based pro-union consensus right across the United Kingdom, cross-party and people of no political party, articulating a compelling case for the union that will inspire hope. Changing the conversation, not a simple yes or no to United Ireland, but rather, do we want to stay in the four-country partnership United Kingdom? One of the things that I want to share with you, having spent most of my post-school life in England or abroad, is there are more pro-union people than you think. I frequently meet people who say, I want Northern Ireland to stay in the United Kingdom because they feel that once one country goes, it'll have the domino effect. And while I'm greatly encouraged by the temporary setback that Scottish nationalism is suffering, there's no guarantee that that setback will continue. And when I then say to people, why don't you articulate that? Then you get a number of reasons coming forward that, yes, we want to be pro-union, but pro-union seems to be associated with one political entity. That causes concern in the sense that I don't necessarily share their values. And that's why a pro-union constituency needs to be developed, because there are more and more people who would say, yes, I don't want Northern Ireland to leave the United Kingdom, but I can't identify with some of the people who are at the forefront of articulating what they see as unionism. We need to refute the case for United Ireland, not with traditional arguments, but with what I call non-partisan intellectual rigour. I think you can develop a case for intellectual unionism, not least because I don't believe that the nationalists think there is such a case, but there is. And we've got to work together to try and articulate an intellectually rigorous case for unionism. We need to engage with the electorate in the Republic, and we need, finally, to expose this idea of the third community. The third community, remember, there are three communities now, they suggest, in Northern Ireland: Protestant, Catholic and non-aligned. But the idea of this third community, I believe, is only credence so long as the constitutional issue is not at the forefront. Once it comes to the forefront, everybody will have to make a choice. And that, again, has to be brought out. We need to get on the front foot. I'm sure most of you here this evening are pro-union. You want the United Kingdom to remain as Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England, as I do. And we need to get on the front foot. We don't need to be embarrassed about speaking up for the union. I have an old adage which I've frequently used down through my career, and I believe it's very apposite. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And just because there is no border poll on the horizon today or tomorrow, probably for a few years, that does not mean we should lose the opportunity to start articulating a very clear and compelling case for the union. I've come to the last slide. Arlene asked me how long am I going to blether for, and I reassured her we'd not go beyond 40 minutes, and I think I've kept to that. What we want to do in Together UK is to galvanise opinion across the United Kingdom, reframe the arguments and change the conversation. I don't believe a United Ireland is either inevitable or desirable. But if we don't prepare, if we just sit back and hope for the best, then we could slip into a United Ireland and a disunited kingdom. Go back to the point I made earlier. There'll only have to lose one referendum. There won't be another one to get us back. So just as the independence movement has stalled in Scotland, there's an opportunity, but we must embrace this opportunity to galvanise those who feel like us in a broad church pro-union constituency and have belief and confidence that we can win the argument. You don't want to go into any argument feeling we're going to lose, but you're more likely to lose. I hope that's of some help to you, ladies and gentlemen, but I really would encourage you to realise that we have an opportunity, we've got the arguments. Let's develop the intellectual rigour and let's get into the debate with our colleagues and show to the new pro-union constituency we want to build that we have the case that we can truthfully say, going back to the start, being with the UK is best for all. Thank you very much.